All right, time for another DraftPhysics.com, debatephysics.com also. And we do have some debate, but it's in veiled language. And we don't get people to just answer simple questions. So, I mean, I'd have on the website some questions related to this very statement. And I basically just say, do you really believe? Do you, watching this video, really believe it takes 100 times the energy to spin a motor 10 times as fast? Do you believe that actually physically happens in this world? That if I want the motor to go, 10 revolutions, and then I want to go 100 revolutions, that I have to put 100 times more energy in, not 10 times, 100 times. Do you believe that's true? Because that's what the kinetic energy theorem demands. And so if you're going to believe that it is mv squared, you're going to have to accept that that's a truth, and it's really unacceptable nonsense. You certainly have no evidence of it. So you're believing in a fable, plainly. All right, so off to the comments. So Kevin Bates, who I just don't, he hasn't answered these questions, frankly. He won't state anything emphatically about what exactly he believes and what he's up to. So he has responded again. All right, and that's okay. And he keeps trying to, in my opinion, reclamate arguments that aren't very relevant or, in my opinion, even actual. There's no actual argument he's making. Doesn't mean anything. So we'll go through it, and I'll just point out these parts where I'm saying, what is it you're trying to say? Because it doesn't mean anything, frankly. Can't mean anything. If I came across as trolling, then I understand that was not my intent. Okay, well, that's you saying so, but whatever. I will do my best to clarify. Well, your best wasn't quite good enough. So, yeah, I don't see the clarification. It's still more indirect language, in my opinion. The shadow analogy was to explain how the surface shadow is a function of whatever is blocking the light. It's a function of whatever's blocking the light, but as stated, it isn't affecting the thing blocking the light at all. The shadow is just an effect of proximity. That's it. And it doesn't happen if we weren't in atmosphere. If we weren't in atmosphere, the shadow would be kind of obvious because the only thing you could shadow would be the direct rays from the sun. So there wouldn't be much controversy. And the fact will still remain that the object collecting the light, if I move my hand up, I don't change how much light my hand is collecting, but I'll certainly change the shadow tremendously. So if I go from an inch, I have a nice dark shadow, and I just go a few inches higher, I'm not collecting more light, and there's absolutely zero shadow on my hand. So I've completely annihilated the shadow. It's been spread all over the place, and it disappears. So obviously what's affecting this and what's happening here aren't terribly correlated. Okay, my hand isn't experiencing a difference in its force, and that's the important part here. The thing making the shadow is almost, irrelevant. The real factor is just the proximity of the object that the shadow is being cast on, to put it that way. So this doesn't really have anything to do with changing the force of gravity in any way, changing how much force something has to apply to stay straight in a stream or against the wind. It doesn't have anything to do with any of the analogies I provided debunking kinetic energy, which, again, you haven't emphatically stated that you think is garbage theory. So I suppose if you would emphatically state that, yes, you understand that mv squared is a fable, it has no correlation to reality. State that, and then I could take this a little more seriously as just a side subject. But it seems to me you keep trying to imply that this has some relevance to the subject of kinetic energy, and I'm going to argue it has zero relevance, or the subject of gravity for that matter. All right, the shadow analogy was to explain how the surface shadow is a function of whatever is blocking the light source. Sorry, it's not really. It's a function of how close the surface is to the object, and the distances involved. And again, it has nothing to do with the object. This object creating shadow doesn't change any, and the shadow can change entirely. So it has nothing, the two are not correlated. That the surface shadow is a function of these variables. Okay, what variable? Except the distance of the surface from the object. And the fact is the object will not change how much force it's being affected by, how much light is cast on it. And the only thing it can change is how the surface absorbs the shadow, whether it spreads the shadow or whether the shadow is confined. Let's see. These variables and does not exist on its own. So whatever that even means. Again, you want to sit there and pretend that the shadow is a thing. It's an event. All right. It's not a thing itself. It's a consequence of things landing on the surface or not landing on the surface. Events aren't things. Okay. It is my opinion that time is the same category as the surface shadow. So you can have that opinion. I find it ludicrous and incomprehensible. I don't see any correlation whatsoever. I don't know how you compare the spreading of a shadow based on how close something gets to a surface and some notion of time. How time could be in any way related in that way. I can't make any sense out of that at all. Alright, so let's read some more. Let's read that again. Alright. It is my opinion that time is in the same category as that surface shadow. That somehow time is a byproduct of some circumstance. Okay, I'm saying that, no, I'm going to say exactly the opposite. That time is an elemental function of the universe. It's not emergent in any way. It's fundamental and elemental to the fact that there's no such thing as instantaneous. Nothing can move at instantaneous speed from one place to another, so therefore there's time. And so the creation of time is just a consequence of the fact that no thing in the universe moves instantaneously from one place to another. Okay, time in my opinion exists as a function of distance. This would mean that if you can alter your relationship to distance, whatever the hell that would mean, I just don't know what these words mean. Alter my relationship to distance. And how do I alter my relationship besides taking time to move closer or further away? I don't even know what that could mean. You would also be affecting your measurement of time, and I would argue that you can't affect it. So you're saying that the clocks break, some sort of ideal clock, like a light clock or some other. I'm saying no. You can break regular clocks. Yeah, you can throw your Timex watch, to the bottom of the ocean, and it'll probably fail. Okay, so you can do things to, break clocks, but this idea that you're breaking time, in my opinion, is nonsense. All right, so. Let's see, do I need to go anywhere else with this? This would mean that if you could alter your relationship to distance, you would also affect your measurement of time. This is not time travel. Okay, so yeah, but still, it's still in the same category. It's an implication of what you're saying. If you can arbitrarily squish distance without taking time, then you can basically time travel. But whatever, I'll argue the argument as it is and such. So leave us. Alright, should be back. Alright, so I'm just going to make this simple counter argument to any notion that time is variable or you can change it in any way or measure it wrong. I mean, you can measure it wrong, but I'm just saying, frankly, if you're trying to measure it right, you can't get it wrong, because we know certain things move at certain speeds. So I'm just saying all of the forces, gravity, electricity, magnetism, light, they all move at the same speed. Okay, so we know that the forces carry information, that the information travels distances. Okay, and it does it really reliable. We're looking at light from stars that are, long moved on, so they're completely somewhere else. We're looking at the past, and the only thing that's left of that, what used to exist, is this shadow, okay, of a representation of it, an effect it had that took a billion light years to travel across the universe to get to us. But we know it's very reliable. The speed is very reliable. There's no indication there's any variable speed to any one of the forces that you can ever change their speed in any real way. And the simple argument is that the force is the only source of motion. It's the thing that elementally has momentum, okay? And everything else is just made out of this dead matter, electrons and protons essentially. And this force stuff moves the electrons and protons, and that moves the atoms, and the atoms move the bigger thing made out of atoms. And it's all just about collecting this stuff. And you collect it by having a disproportion in one direction, frankly, and that's how it's collected. And it's just basically this stuff that going the speed of light. Everything else has to go slower because everything else is heavier. Okay, so it all has the Lorentz contraction built right into it, in the sense that you can never make matter go faster than the force, because the force is the only thing making the matter move in the first place. It's pushing constantly. It sticks and pushes constantly. Okay, so it has to stay in relationship to the matter for the matter to be affected by it. It can't just hit it and give it something. So the force is the motion in the universe, and the matter collects the motion, and all of it is very reliable. Every distance is the same thing. Light will travel the distance. No matter where I put the distance in space, light travels the distance in exactly the same amount of time. Doesn't take longer or less. The time, the distances don't arbitrarily contract. The space, as Newton would say, the space, although empty, is real. Distance is a real thing. It doesn't disappear and it doesn't appear. Okay, you can't change it. A distance is a distance. It isn't flexible. It isn't variable. So I don't know. I can't make any sense out of what you're talking about. Some kind of function that allows distances to change. Sorry, I don't believe that can happen. It's a three-dimensional physical universe with objects in it, and they don't magically get closer and further away. None of that happens. They have to be pushed closer or pushed further away. All right. So, yes, this gibberish doesn't mean anything to me. It's not time travel, nor do I believe in any extra time dimension nonsense. I'm just saying the implications of distance flexibility is the same thing. So I don't see how you can separate the fact that you're going to change how much distance is between things, then you're going to change how much time it takes for you to get from one place to another. So I don't know. I have to go through it, I guess, to figure out. Okay, so you're not saying there's any such thing as, but you are saying it. So I'm just saying, what are you saying? What do you think time dilation is then? You really think the distance is dilating? I mean, I'm on a bicycle and I have a flashlight and I'm going that way. Okay, I'm going 50 miles an hour. Are the photons that leave my flashlight really going the speed of light away from me, or is it the speed of light minus 50 miles an hour? All right. Current theories of relativity have people thinking that time is some magical material that can be traveled, twisted. Well, you're saying it can be twisted in the sense you're saying I could somehow make distance disappear, or I can make distance appear. You're saying you can bend distance. I'm saying, no, you can't. It's a three-dimensional universe. You can't bend distance. You can't make it disappear. Or that it has its own properties and abilities and it's absolute garbage. Well, I have the same opinion. So if you can choose the words absolute garbage for something, I'm going to use the word absolute garbage for any notion that distance is variable. All right, this is why I have to use the silly and very simple explanation about shadows. Well, again, I don't see how it's simple at all. I don't see how it's related at all. I don't see how it's connected at all. Time is not a shadow. So that people could understand the difference. Well, I wish I was one of the people that could understand the difference based on that analogy, but I certainly can't see any analogy between time and a shadow. Between something that exists on its own and something that exists as a function of something else. So again, how is time a function of distance when time doesn't mean anything if I just make things move the distance at an instantaneous speed? So just, you're not saying anything. Of course, it takes time to travel distance. That's the elemental fact. I don't think there's a more elemental fact than the fact that it takes time to travel distance in this universe. As I have already stated, the shadow keeps going on. Explanation was not directed at you. I don't care who was direct. What does that even mean? It wasn't directed at me. Who was it directed at? And for what purpose, other than to confuse a subject that you were on? Yeah. I am sure you already understand these simple concepts, so I don't understand a damn thing you're saying. I can't understand how a shadow is anything like time. Time is an elemental function. A shadow isn't. However, you continue to assert extra meaning and intent that is not there. Yes, I'll continue to assert I don't understand why you brought this up in the context you brought it up in, and I still don't understand what you're saying. How is it possibly relevant to anything I understand in terms of how the universe functions? What's this? What are you saying here? Distance is variable. How is it? How so? The shadow explanation is, here he goes again, it's not a rate argument. Clearly the way you were using it is, you were implying that I somehow, when I'm making more or less of a shadow, that somehow I'm changing how much force is hitting the object that's making the shadow. And that's just not true. Alright, it's not a disguised inverse square troll attack. Well, you say it's not. I still am in the air on that one. And it's not nefarious indication of anything. Well, it's a nefarious indication of confusion. I don't see the point of adding confusion to any of these subjects. It seems to me you're just confusing the subject. I'm saying something very simple. You're not saying, oh, okay, I don't believe force pushes matter. You could say something simple and say, I think matter moves on its own and it moves variable, distance changes. You could say something direct. I can't make anything out of this mush. How is my comment relevant to the subject of constant forces and the relationship to time? Well, I'm asking the same question. How is your comment relevant to the video it was put on? And in what way did your saying this is an interesting add-on, how does it add on to the subject? Because my entire post was about time. And again, I'm still arguing your entire post is implying that I have to consider some other factor besides the limited capacity of things to move a certain velocity. If it's moving a certain velocity, it can't magically go faster and it can't magically go slower. It has to be affected by a real force. And I'm stating that in all of my analogies, the real force was constant. So therefore, it wasn't going variable distances. It wasn't doing any of that crap. It's a constant amount of pressure being applied that requires a constant amount of pressure to be overcome. Now, if you would like to comment, of time dilation, no, that's not a very good sentence. Yes, which I'm arguing is non-existent, and the only thing they've proven is they can break any clock. So even an atomic clock is vulnerable. And of course, it's reasonable that atomic clocks will be vulnerable, because I can make an atomic clock tick faster by merely changing the density of the radioactive material I am using. So if I make the little atoms closer to each other, their half-life changes. So the half-life is completely variable to the circumstance in which the atomic isotope is placed. So if I place the isotope in a crowded environment, its half-life goes way down, and if I isolate it, it goes way up. So yeah, it's really easy to understand how you could fuck that clock up. And the fact is that velocity happens to fuck the clock up. So if I give an atomic isotope, radioactive isotope velocity, it will decay slower. Now, so that would be a nice experiment if they do it. Let's put some, uranium in a centrifuge and see if it decays at the same rate. which I am of the opinion would be distance dilation. So that I still can't even understand. What the fuck is distance dilation? So you tell me what that is. Space contracts and expands. That's the only thing I can make out of that. So for no reason, it just goes woo, whoa, woo, whoa, woo, woo, woo. You know, somehow the distance between me and my desk changes. It somehow is flexible. That somehow if I say the magic words, Kazam, it'll, you know, I can change the position of my desk. I mean, bullshit. All right. I would find that interesting. Well, you just, whatever floats your boat, as they say. I would like to hear more about your take on this subject. I just don't have a take on it. I don't see any necessity for any of this conversation about how you can bend distance or time. The three-dimensional universe works just fine. Newton got a ton of right answers thinking about the universe as a static three-dimensional place where the distances are firm and the time is firm. So they're both being controlled by hard constants. Okay, not flexible constants, hard constants. All right. So yeah, you still have to do a lot of work here. I'm just trying to, you know, what I would really like is to understand your point of view, and I can't really understand it in the way, the context you're placing it. So if you do go to the website, you go to the Profiles in Cowardice link, okay, at the bottom of that page is a bunch of questions. You have to go a ways, okay, right in here, right in here. Is there any good reason they haven't done the Eddington experiment from space? Do you think it requires 100 times the energy spin time? You know, answer these questions and I'll know what you're talking about. All right. I mean, do you still think mv squared is a viable theory of reality? Do you really think the bullet has 2,000 joules of energy, that is watts of energy, and that the gun recoil only has 2? You think that crap is true or not? I mean, that's my main subject. And again, you want to have a conversation about relativity, it's okay. I'm just going to argue that what's the evidence for it? Oh, that's right. There really isn't any, right? There's just broken clocks. I mean, there's no evidence that time actually does anything. There's just evidence that you can affect different objects differently by giving them velocity. I mean, I could give I could take a frozen piece of ice, or I could take a blob of pudding, and I could move them at a velocity, and one of them, because it's solid, all of the solid will keep moving, and the other one will go spreading all over the place because the force will hit it unevenly, and so some pieces won't get any velocity because they just shear off. You know, I mean, I can give all kinds of examples where there shouldn't, you know, there's the whatever you're using to measure it has limited functionality. It isn't indestructible. And you know, this, when we're trying to measure time, we can understand that that's completely breakable in the sense that I can break. You can't really describe a clock, you know, besides the photon clock, that's not breakable. That's, you know, where you can't throw a force variable in that will break the function of the clock. Take away gravity and, you know, all the pendulum clocks are out of luck. Anyway, certainly the sundial is really out of luck. Yeah, it's not going to tell any good time. Oh, I didn't have that on. I should have had that on. Yeah, my bad. So this was the web page, so you have to go through some crap here. You know, I'll fix this eventually, write the questions in a better place, but they're at the bottom of the page, so just letting you know, bottom of the page, right in there. Whole bunch of questions. Anyway, but the main one is, do you believe mv squared has any credibility as a real description of reality? And yeah, and then we can go from there, because it seems to me you're trying to make some excuse to say somehow because distance is variable, therefore mv squared works. And I'm not going to buy that, of course. Alright, I don't think there's anything else. I guess I could check to see if there's any new shit comments. Yeah, could check. Nope. Alright, so till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. Yeah, I think, I don't find time dilation at all necessary or interesting. But clearly other people do, so I guess I have to necessarily talk about something that I don't see how it adds anything to physics at all. It's just noise. You can understand the universe perfectly well as a solid three-dimensional mechanism controlled by the moving force that always moves the same speed, and you can just collect portions of its momentum. Alright, till the next time and such. Yeah, that's enough.